But first, an astonishing report on how China is paying or using Australian scientists to snatch Australian technology, including for its military. Now, it was last month that the head of America's FBI warned of an incredible scheme set up by the Chinese dictatorship to steal Western technology by recruiting or paying or even blackmailing scientists in the West.
Through its talent recruitment programs, like the so-called 1,000 Talents program, the Chinese government tries to entice scientists to secretly bring our knowledge and innovation back to China. Take the case of scientist Hong Jintan, for example, a Chinese national and American lawful permanent resident. He applied to China's 1,000 Talents program and stole more than $1 billion, that's with a B, worth of trade secrets from his former employer, an Oklahoma-based petroleum company. And just 2 weeks ago, Hao Zhang was convicted of economic espionage, theft of trade secrets, and conspiracy for stealing proprietary information about wireless devices from 2 U.S. companies. One of those companies had spent over 20 years developing the technology that Zhang stole.
Now, it's not all about theft, it's also about recruitment. And this scheme has recruited dozens of scientists to help China's, well, for instance, its nuclear weapons program. But remember, this is an aggressive dictatorship that is already bullying Australia and could, say some experts, start a war in this very region within the next decade, probably to take back Taiwan. So many people here, including in universities, have been so blind to this menace. I mean, there are plenty of people running around, businessmen in particular, oh, China could make us rich. Well, it could also make us slaves. But now we learn that this dictatorship, this 1,000 Talents program, has also been recruiting Australian scientists. The Australian newspaper today has detailed dozens of examples of Australian scientists lured to work in China or on Chinese projects after signing away their intellectual property, which is often intellectual property that was built up right here in Australia and financed by Australia. I mean, these people could get second salaries of $150,000 a year. They can get a lab paid for them in China. They can get lots of lovely travel. And on the condition that they do not criticise China. That's the condition. Some contracts are known to include a clause saying they can't even say that they work with or for China. What's the secret? Now, remember, in many cases, we did fund these scientists. Some have got some of this prestigious Australian Research Council grants. And what you funded, the Chinese dictatorship then gets. Sure, it could be benign stuff of benefit to all humanity, but it could also be that the research that we taxpayers help to fund then goes to help China become even more militarily threatening. Because this is not some pussycat regime. It is a dictatorship. It threatens its neighbours. It bans democracy. It jails dissidents. It has jailed up to 1 million Muslim Uyghurs. It has destroyed free speech in Hong Kong. It jails Australian citizens, like writer Yang Henjung, a dissident, jailed without a trial. And now it threatens and punishes Australia for not kowtowing to China. And we have to ask, are our universities just too greedy for Chinese cash? Or too stupid or too willing to ignore the threat? That they and our government allow this massive transfer of intellectual property from Australia to a dangerous dictatorship? Joining me is Sharri Markson, Sky News host and investigations editor for the Australian newspaper, where she has been investigating exactly this 1,000 Talents program. Sharri, congratulations on your brilliant, and Kyle as well, on the brilliant expose in the paper today. What is China trying to achieve with this scheme?
Well, a US Senate report just last year, so the US had a big congressional committee investigation of this program and what it was doing. And that Senate report found that this was part of China's way to have both economic and military gain over other countries around the world. In effect, I mean, you could say that it's trying that, and the head of the FBI has described it as this, as intellectual property theft and economic espionage. So what they do is they target the most brilliant brains around the world. There's been an estimated 7,000 people recruited under the 1,000 Talents Plan or similar Chinese government foreign recruitment programs. And it's a way of getting access to the best advancements, technological advancements, whatever field it's in from around the world, but usually it's specifically for their economic or military gain.
Now, how does it work with the Australian academics that they've targeted, and what sort of research are they trying to go for?
So the ones that we mostly found that they were looking for was in the space of material science. So it's anything from, and I've got it here, biotechnology, quantum science, nanotechnology, new materials, superconducting materials, and other advanced high tech, very complicated areas. But there's definitely a focus on artificial intelligence, and there's definitely a focus on unmanned aerial vehicles or drones. And so, you know, often the academics who are doing this research, it might be for medical reasons or, you know, really great reasons that could benefit humankind. But the risk is that under President Xi Jinping's military-civil fusion, where the academic sector can be used for military purposes, the risk is that this research that does have a defence application or may have a defence application could be misused for more nefarious means, whether it's surveillance of minority groups or dissidents or for the, you know, China's military modernisation.
Well, it's interesting they don't target Australian academics expert in gender studies, transgender theory or diversity. But there you go, when we're such experts on those fields.
Yeah, we'd happily give them away, Andrew.
Yeah, well, sorry about that. Look, it suddenly came to me, a rush of blood to the head. Sharri, can you blame these academics for saying yes to, you know, money, fame, support for the research, a lovely lab in China, travel? Who wouldn't turn that down?
Well, look, I think when initially these sort of partnerships might have been offered in a more benign era, but now clearly China has another agenda. And there's been a lot of experts who've been reporting in this area, including Anne-Marie Brady in New Zealand and Alex Josky in Australia. And they just point out the concerns that can arise from these programs, the high level of misconduct that can arise from these programs. And they're different to other foreign talent recruitment programs because within the contracts, and there are numerous contracts that have been made public and found their way into the public domain, and we quote them in the Australian newspaper today and in the Australian online. And there's often a clause in these legally binding contracts that says the academic cannot disclose that they are participating in this 1,000 Talents Plan without permission. So they often operate in the shadows. It's often very secretive. The Chinese government has done a purge of deleted, censored all mentions of 1,000 Talents in the wake of the FBI really starting to investigate and come down hard on this issue. And, you know, the FBI is right to take that action because it can disguise, you know, and we heard from Christopher Wray just in your editorial then, you know, this is a serious risk, a loss of intellectual property, commercialization by China that, you know, should be in the US or Australia. And there's the national security element to it as well. And it's just such a problem that in Australia, all we have are guidelines. We have foreign interference guidelines that Peter Dutton and Dan Tien introduced in November 2019. That's it, guidelines for the university sector to follow. And I tell you what, Andrew, judging by the responses, because as part of this, you know, we've been looking at this since May, and we put questions to all of the universities initially saying, how many 1,000 Talents Plan academics or other foreign government, you know, recruitment program academics do you have in your employ? And they couldn't tell us. They either don't know or they're not disclosing it to the public. It's not transparent. So this is a space where the Morrison government hasn't been strong enough. There's not enough measures in place.
They've got to wake up. They have got to wake up. They've got to wake up. Just finally, Sharri, just briefly, I can't help but notice that the overwhelming majority of the Australian scientists in this program are ethnic Chinese. That obviously is a very touchy subject, spells some problem potentially down the line for patriotic Chinese right here, the suspicion that they would come under. Why is that?
Look, there's a couple of reasons for it. The program doesn't only target people of Chinese ethnicity. It mainly does, but it doesn't only. And, we've seen the case of the Harvard University professor in the States who's been indicted for lying about being part of the 1,000 Talents plan and not disclosing that he was getting millions of dollars while employed full-time at Harvard, and he's not of Chinese ethnicity. But why it's often effective for the Chinese government or the Communist Party to target, to try and recruit people with Chinese ethnicity is for two reasons. They might have leverage over them if their family is still in China. And secondly, they think that they have an allegiance to the country. They still have an allegiance to China, and that they would be serving China's national interest. Well,
that's one of the things about multiculturalism. I have to say, at the risk of a lightning bolt striking me out of the sky for saying such impious things. Sharri Markson, brilliant report today. In fact, a very, very important report today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Andrew.